our online live lecture session of Swayam Prabha channel. I am Riya Pramanik. So we have started our BPSC 132 paper, that is Indian Government and Politics, in last from last session. Today is the second session of this subject. So, in today's session, we will be looking out at block 2, that is Indian Constitution. And in this particular block, I will be talking about unit 4, that is basic features. So, this unit is very important because it comprises of all the basic features that our Indian constitutions have. So, let's start with this. So, let's see what are the topics which we will be discussing in today's sessions. So, first and foremost is the historical background. And in this historical background, I will be talking about the Government of India Act 1935 and about the Constituent Assembly. Further, I will be looking at essential features of our Indian constitutions. In this, we will be looking at sovereign, democratic, and republic, union of states, fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy, and the union that comprises of executive, legislature, and judiciary. Third important thing which we will be talking today in our session is about emergency provisions. In this part, I will be talking about general emergency, declaration of constitutional emergency, and financial emergency. And the last thing which we will be covering is the federalism and center state relations. So let's get started. So let's start with the historical background. To know a subject or to know a thing, it is very important to know about its history, the historical background, because whatever we learn today has some kind of history in the past. So here in this slide, we can see that we will be talking about Government of India Act 1935, which is one of the most important act ever, and the Constituent Assembly. So, in introduction, let's talk about the Constitution of India. The Constitution of India is the will of the people of the country. That means whatever is there in the Constitution that represents the will of the citizens or the people of this country. So, it is not something that is made by only a group of people or few persons, but it is something which is representing all of us. So, the constitution was prepared after lengthy deliberations in the Constituent Assembly. So, because after so many years of colonization, we were about to start a new country, an independent country. So, it was a very important need to have a constitution, a rule book through which our country should be governed. So, for that, a constituent assembly was constituted to formulate, to make a constitution, and there were n number of sessions happened before finalizing the actual constitution. There were many discussions, many deliberations on various topics. So after lengthy deliberations only, the constitution came into existence. So these deliberations have begun on 6th of December 1946 and came into force on 26th January 1950. So it took around 2 years and 11 months time. So it started from 6th December 1946 and it was ready on 26th November 1949, but it was decided that for its enforcement, the date is decided on 26 January 1950. So it was completed in 26 November 1949, but it came into force on 26 January 1950. So the precursor to the Indian Constitution was the Government of India Act 1935. So why we read about Government of India Act 1935, which came during the British period, and we considered it important because in this act, this is one kind of a precursor of our Indian Constitution. Whatever we see today in our Constitution, that was already told in that act. So that is why there is a very much essentiality in Government of India Act 1935. So let's talk about Government of India Act 1935. It is the act which was the product of the report of a joint select committee that was discussed in the British Parliament before finally receiving the assent of the Queen on 2nd of August 1935. So, after many modifications, the features of the Government of India Act 1935 were incorporated in the Constitution of India. So, whatever we see today in our constitution, that was there in Government of India Act 1935, but there were many or few modifications required. So after few modifications, this was adopted or incorporated in the Constitution of India. So these includes what were the features that was there in the Government of India Act 1935. These includes federal structure in the form of union and state government, division of powers between states and the union, bicameral legislature, that means there will be two houses in the parliament, that is lower house and upper house, and a federal court. So all these things were there in the Government of India Act 1935, which were later incorporated in our constitution. So let's talk about Constituent Assembly. So, the constitutions had to live up to the aspirations of the people who had been exposed to several centuries of injustices, social exploitation, and discrimination, as well as 2 centuries of colonial dominance. So, we can see that it was the time when India was suffering a lot. It was a colony for more than 2 centuries. It was under the British colonial empire, and there were many exploitations happened on Indian people. So this constitution was for all the people who are residing in the land, and it is something which had to live up to the aspirations of those people, because they have been exposed to several centuries of injustices, social exploitations, then discrimination on the basis of caste, religion, gender, as well as 2 centuries of colonial dominance. So, the motto of the constitution making was exercised by undertaken was the consensus rather than the majority principle. So, what method was adopted in the Constituent Assembly? It was about consensus of all people rather than majority principle. It was not like that if there is 100 people present in the assembly, and if 51 of them agree on some policy, and it will be adopted. No, it was not like that. There was a consensus policy. Everybody has their consensus, given their consensus, then only that policy was adopted. So representatives from diverse ideological backgrounds and several of them with a legal background worked together. So the Constituent Assembly was comprising all people from all the ideological background, and some were from legal background, and they all together worked on this constitution. At the head of the exercise was Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and the leading light was Jawaharlal Nehru. The person who was leading these proceedings was Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who later became the first president of India. And the leading light, the guiding light, was Jawaharlal Nehru, who later became the first prime minister of independent India. So there were also, apart from Nehru and Rajendra Prasad, there were many renowned members of the Constituent Assembly, which included Gopalaswamy Iyengar, Shama Prasad Mukherjee, J.B. Kriplani, Vallabhbhai Patel, and Pattabhi Sitaramaiah. So, in the Constituent Assembly, it was comprised of 381 members. So, there were 381 members in the Constituent Assembly who deliberated, who discussed among various policies to be incorporated in the Constitution for Free India. So, they represented all these 381 members, represented the various political parties. There were many political parties existed at that point of time. It was not only the Congress, but there were many parties at that point of time. But the Constituent Assembly represented various political parties with various ideologies. Also, provinces and princely states were also represented in the assembly. So, as we know that at that point of time, there were many princely states, many kingdoms existed in India. So they were also represented in the Constituent Assembly debates. On the basis of the deliberations in the assembly, the drafting committee, which was constituted on 29th of August 1947, prepared the draft text of the constitution, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the chairman of the drafting committee. So, the drafting committee, which comprised all the policies, all the laws to be incorporated into the constitution, that was constituted in 29th of August 1947, few days after independence of India, and this was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was the chairman of the drafting committee. Because of the broad vision of the constitution makers that the Constitution of India was never abrogated and it was never seriously questioned since the time it came into force. So it is one of the biggest achievement for India that since the constitutions was enforced, after that there were never any time when Indian constitution was abrogated, and it was never seriously questioned till now. So the changing requirements were attended through affecting amendments to the constitution while its essential features were retained. So it was also believed and discussed that later on with changing time there must be many requirements which should be added in the constitution, and there must be something which should be deleted. So there was flexibility given in our constitution through which we can amend, and then also it was uh, required that the essential features of the constitution should not be hampered. So this was all these things were done because of the broad vision of our constitution makers, the persons who were present in the constituent assembly, who were discussing, deliberating n number of time on making any kind of policies or decisions on any kind of laws. So let's move forward to essential features. So there are many essential features in our constitutions, but we will be talking about the most important and most essential features of our constitutions in this part of our session. So here we will be talking about sovereign, democratic republic feature, union of states, fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy, and about the union, which is comprising of executive, legislature, and judiciary. So let's move forward. So here are five, six essential features which should we all should know. The first thing is that the constitution is supreme in our country. So if we talk about anything which is in the highest pedal, that is the Constitution of India, which is considered to be the supreme in our whole country. Next essential feature comes the sovereignty of India cannot be surrendered or pledged. That means this sovereignty cannot be surrendered to anyone at any cost. So the sovereignty, the feature of sovereignty is very essential for our country. Next comes that India is a republic and cannot be turned into a monarchy. So there is no possibility that India in future will turn into monarchy again. So because India is republic, and with republic it means that whenever the head of a country or head of a state is elected rather than inheritance, rather than he or she inherit that post, it is called republic. So for example, in Britain, the British or the United Kingdom is not a republic. Why? Because it has constitutional monarchy. The king and queen is still the head of the state over there. That is why Britain is not a republic country, whereas India is a republic. Why? Because the head of the state is the president, and president is elected and not inherited. So this is why India is a republic, and it is said that it cannot be turned into a monarchy at any cost. The fourth essential feature is democracy is a way of life than merely providing for adult franchise. So it is believed by the constitution makers that democracy is not only about adult franchise given to all, but it is more than a way of life. The democratic practices should be there. There should be freedom of expression and all. And it is not like that only given voting rights will ensure democracy, but it is a way of life. So the next essential feature comprises of secularism and independent judiciary. It is considered to be two pedestals of this democracy. So secularism, where all religions stay peacefully together, is about secularism. And independent judiciary, it is very important that judiciary is independent. Otherwise, people will rich or influential people will influence the judiciary, and the society will not be turned into a just society. So independence of judiciary is very much essential, and secularism and independent judiciary is considered to be two pedestals of democracy. Next comes the amendments to the constitution can be made without altering its essentials. So it is very important to understand that we can make amendments in the constitution to change certain things, but the essential features of our constitution should not be removed or hampered. So there was a case on Keshwananda Bharti case which talks about basic feature doctrine. So let's move forward to another most important sovereign democratic republic essential feature. So the preamble to the constitution declares that the people of the country are the sovereigns. So sovereignty means a country where the rules and all the decisions are taken by the people residing in that particular country, and there is no external influence over them. So sovereignty means this. And our preamble, the preamble, it is also sometimes give us a hint of what will be there in our constitution. So it is a kind of a index page of a book, and the book is the constitution. So preamble, it is written that people of the country are the sovereigns. That means there is no external influence or external pressure over them. In other words, sovereign rests in the people and is exercised through the institutions that have been created for that purpose. So the sovereignty of the country cannot be pledged. That is, India cannot be turned into a colony or a dependency of another country. So uh, because of all the experiences we had in the colonial rule for so many years, so many centuries under them. So it is made sure by the constitution makers that India cannot be turned into a colony in near future, and it will not be dependent on any other country also. So in the preamble, it is also stated that the country shall be a republic, as I already told you briefly in the previous slide, and shall adhere to a democratic form of government. So, that in the time when India got independence after, if we see the world politics of that time, it was the time when the Second World War ended in 1945, and after that, many new colonies were independent, and the all those countries wanted to be a democratic country at first, because of the exploitation they have faced in colonized conditions. They wanted their country to be free. They wanted their country to be a space where there will be equality, there will be freedom. So many countries wanted their newly independent nation to be democratic, but there were many examples of countries where the democracy couldn't exist for long. So, for example, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, all these countries, they were democratic in first, but later on they were victims of military rule. But India remained a democratic since its inception till now, and it will remain because in the constitution it is written that form of government in India should be democratic. So in republic there is no scope for a monarch to reign over the people, but the people themselves rule the country. So in a republican country, the people rule themselves, and how they rule themselves? Through elected representatives. Next essential feature comes the union of states. An important feature of constitution is that it has constituted India as a union of states. So we should always remember that the word federalism is not mentioned in our constitution. What is written in our constitution? That India is a union of state. So uh, there is also a scope in the constitution to create new states as well as to admit new ones. So there were permissions given by the constitution that new states can be created and new ones could be admitted. So, for example, the formation of states for the first time after independence in 1956 by bifurcating some of then existing states on a linguistic basis, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, etc. So, basically, from initial times after getting independence, when India was growing in a good country, in a democratic country, at that point of time, there were states formed on the basis of language. So, admission of new states into the Indian Union is the admission of Sikkim in 1975. So, in 1975, Sikkim was a new state which was admitted into India. On August 5, 2019, the state of Jammu and Kashmir was bifurcated into two union territories, that is Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh. Next comes the fundamental rights, which is very, very important to understand because it is something which gives us a value of being an Indian citizens. It provides us with very much power because why? We are citizens of India and we have some fundamental rights with us, which nobody can take us away. So, the fundamental rights could be summarized as right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to religion, cultural and educational rights, and the right to constitutional remedies. Apart from all these six fundamental rights, there were also one more fundamental rights that was right to property, which was made a legal right. So earlier it was a fundamental right, but later on it made a legal right through the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, and now there are only six fundamental rights with us. So, the fundamental rights are enshrined in Part 3 of the Constitution. It is very important. Noted down that the fundamental rights are enshrined in Part 3 of the Constitution and their implementation is guaranteed by the Supreme Court. So, there is a these rights are justiciable because if somebody take these rights away from us, we can go to court, we can go to Supreme Court for our fundamental rights. So fundamental rights are applicable only to the citizen of the country. So all these fundamental rights are only for the citizen of the country and not to foreigners or aliens who are outsiders. So, but apart from this, we should also remember that there are some articles which are applicable to all irrespective of their citizenship. So, what are those articles? It is Article 20, 21, and 22 are applicable to all of the people irrespective of their nationality. So, except during emergency, fundamental rights cannot be suspended. So, earlier there was a provision where in emergency, during emergency, all the fundamental rights were suspended. However, through the 44th Amendment, Article 20 and 21 cannot be suspended even when a proclamation of emergency is in operation. So, after the 44th Amendment Act, it was decided that even during emergency, two articles cannot be suspended, that is Article 20 and Article 21. Next comes to right to freedom. The Constitution ensures the right to freedom under Article 19 to 22. So, from starting from 19 to 22, right to freedom are provided to us. So, Article 19 guarantees the right to freedom of speech and expression, right to peaceful assembly, right to form associations, right to visit and reside in any part of the country, and right to profess and practice one's religion. Whereas Article 20 guarantees that no person shall be punished on the basis of laws that are enacted after a crime has been committed, protection from being punished more than once for the same offense. So, if someone is already punished for an offense once, he or she should not be given punishment again for the same crime, and also protection from standing trial against oneself. Article 21 ensures the protection of personal life and liberty, whereas Article 22 prohibits detention of persons without trial. So let's talk about right to equality. It is from Article 14 to Article 18. So Article 14 guarantees the right to equality before the law and the right to equal protection of the laws. Article 15 guarantees protection from discrimination on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. So, because India is a diverse country, so there were many scope of discrimination between people. So, Article 15 guarantees that there should not be any kind of discrimination, basically on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. Article 16 provides for the right to equality of opportunity in employment to all. Whereas Article 17 is very important because it abolished untouchability. Untouchability was a practice which was there from the ancient times in India, which discriminates because of the caste system, and it considers the idea behind this touchability and untouchability is the idea of pure and impure, purity and impurity. So, this untouchability was abolished through Article 17, which was a very uh, required step at that point of time in India, where there were exploitation on the basis of people's caste. Whereas Article 18 abolished titles, so there were princely states at that point of time where they used titles like Maharaja and all. So all these titles were abolished. But academically, if you have titles like doctorate, if so army titles that were allowed. Let's talk about directive principles of state policy. So there is a difference between fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy, and which we will be talking about in this slide. So the directive principles, also sometimes referred to as DPSP, are an adaptation from the Irish constitution. So as we know that the constitution of India was inspired by many countries constitution. So this idea of directive principle of state policy was adopted from Irish constitution, the constitution from Ireland. So what are DPSP, or the directive principle of state policies? These are broad guidelines which have to be borne in mind while enacting laws and implementing them. So when politicians or the executive or the legislature form laws or make policies, at that point of time they should remember all these directive principles of state policy as their guidelines. So what is the difference I was talking about between fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy? It is that the directive principle of state policy are not justiciable. That means if it is not fulfilled, you can't go to Supreme Court for its enforcement. So there is a difference. Also, their enforcement cannot be questioned in the court of law. If the guidelines provided by the directive principles of state policy are not fulfilled by the government, one cannot question that in the court of law. Also, fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy together, not individually, form the core of the constitution, the true consent. So, together they form the core of the constitution. Let's talk about fundamental duties. So, we have fundamental rights, which we gain from our constitution, but there are some kinds of duties which should we all citizens do. So the fundamental duties enshrined in the constitution are intended to obligate all the citizens to strive for the common benefit of all. So there are some duties which all the citizens of India should do, and they are expected to respect the constitution, national tricolor, and the national anthem. It worked for a harmonious society, setting aside all divisive tendency. So, what is the idea behind fundamental duties? It works for the harmonious society where there will be harmony and peace, setting aside all divisive tendencies. The citizens of the country have a duty to protect its resources, both natural and material, and work towards higher level of achievements. So all of these things comprises the fundamental duties. Next comes the union, that is executive, legislature and judiciary. Let's talk about legislature first. So, India chose to adopt a parliamentary form of government. So, in India, we have parliamentary form of government. The other kind of government is presidential form, but we adopted parliamentary form of government because as we were colony of British colonial rule, in British also they have parliamentary form of government. So, that form we also adopted. The president is the head of the state. In India, there is president, but he is only the head of the state, and his role is only limited to the ceremonial powers. Whereas the real executive power is exercised by the head of the government, that is the prime minister. So, prime ministers also have council of ministers who are collectively responsible to the parliament. So, this council of ministers and prime ministers are responsible and are accountable to the parliament. Now, next talks about executive. In India, the legislature and the executive are drawn from one another, while the judiciary is an independent body. So, in India, executive and legislature works together, and their members are also sometimes common. So, in India, legislature and executive works together, whereas India also has judiciary, which is an independent body. So we should know here that the president in presidential form of government, the legislature and executive work separately. And if a person is a member of the legislature, he can't be a member of the executive in America, whereas or any presidential country, presidential form of government where exists. Whereas executive member is not able to participate in legislative process. So, in a country where there is presidential form of government, the executive and legislature are totally separated. But in India or in any parliamentary form of government, we can see that legislature and executive work together. The legislature comprises of the House of People. So here in India, in Hindi, House of People are commonly known as Lok Sabha, and there is a Council of States, which is known as Rajya Sabha, and the President of India. A member of the Indian Council of Ministers has necessarily to be a member of either house, so either Lok Sabha or upper house Rajya Sabha. So the Union Council of Ministers are required to have membership in either house of the parliament, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Let's talk about the role of president. So both the houses of parliament and the legislature in the states elect the president by means of a single transferable vote. So how a president is elected? He or she is elected through single transferable vote system. The office of the president, its functions, power, tenure, method of elections and re-election, impeachment policies, qualification, etc. are enunciated in Article 52 to 62. So, in our constitution, from Article 52 to 62, all these things are mentioned regarding to president. The president is the supreme commander of the armed force. We should always remember that whether it's navy, army or air force, the supreme commander of all the three armed forces together is the President of India. The President summons both the houses of the Parliament and addresses its joint sessions. He or she appoints all the functionaries of the state. Let's talk about the Union Council of Ministers. So, the cabinet is composed of ministers of cabinet's rank and minister of state, while the council also includes the deputy minister. So, there is a difference between cabinet ministers and council of ministers. In cabinet, it is composed of ministers of cabinet rank and minister of state, whereas in a council, it also includes the deputy ministers. The Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Parliament. The Council of Ministers make recommendations to the President in what is called aids and advices in the affairs of the country. So let's talk about legislature and parliament. So the Indian Parliament is the supreme law-making body of the country. So whatever laws are there in our country are made by the Parliament. The upper house is known as the Rajya Sabha, as I already told you in the last slide, which comprises of the chairman, who is also the vice president of India. So who is the chairman of Rajya Sabha? It is the vice president of India. It has also elected members. The Rajya Sabha also has elected members and 12 nominated members. And these 12 nominated members are nominated by the president, who belongs to various fields, intellectuals who worked for India. So the lower house of the parliament is known as Lok Sabha. Its members are elected from for single term of 5 years or less directly by all eligible voters by means of universal adult suffrage. So, to get elected in Lok Sabha, people have to provide universal adult suffrage, and through that process only, people get elected in Lok Sabha. So, let's talk about judiciary. The third and very important organ of the government is the judiciary. And the highest court of appeal in India is known as Supreme Court. In some countries, the Supreme Court is known as Apex Court, but in India, it is known as Supreme Court. It is the custodian of the Constitution. So, the Constitution makers provided that the judiciary will be the custodian of the Constitution. It is the task of the judiciary to see whether the policies, the decisions which are being made by the Parliament are according to the Constitution or not. So, laws enacted by the legislature can be declared invalid by the Supreme Court if it is of the opinion that they are not in conformity with the provisions of the Constitution. So, if any law or any policy is not according to the Constitution, Supreme Court can declare it invalid. So, this power of the court is known as judicial review. So, the President of India appoints all judges of the Supreme Court and High Court and the Chief Justices. So, as I told you that the President has ceremonial powers, so it is the power of the President to appoint all the judges of the Supreme Court, High Court, and the Chief Justices. So, now let's talk about the emergency provisions. In this part, we will be talking about general emergency, declaration of constitutional emergency, and financial emergency. So, the emergency provisions are enshrined in Part 18 of the Constitutions under Article 352 to 360. So, the Articles 352 to 360s are talking about emergency provisions. There are three types of emergency that can be declared. For the very first time, emergency was declared in the wake of the war with China, which is also known as Indo-China War, which occurred during October 26, 1962. Another proclamation of emergency took place on December 3, 1971, in the wake of the Indian-Pakistan War. This was the time when there was the Bangladesh crisis going on. At this point of time, the second kind of emergency was proclaimed in the year 1971. A third emergency was declared on June 1975. It was revoked in 1977. So, this emergency lasted very long. Critics argue that the third emergency was intended more to retain Mrs. Indira Gandhi in power, that there was the actual threat. So this emergency was highly criticized till now by various scholars, and it was considered to be the darkest period of Indian democracy, as there were arbitrary detentions for a prolonged period of time and accusations of widespread infringement of fundamental rights. So during this 1975 emergency, various fundamental rights were totally suspended in the country. There were no freedom of press. So that is why it is said that this was the darkest period of Indian democracy, because there were many arbitrary practices that were going on. So, the most contentious and abused emergency provision is Article 356. So, there is emergency provision which is very much contentious and abused emergency provision, that is Article 356. Under this article, the governor of the state assumes all functions, carries out the administration in the state on behalf of the president. So it is known as president's rule, and in that all the powers come in the hands of the governor, who rules on the behalf of the president. Let's talk about financial emergency. Financial emergency can be declared under Article 360 in conditions in which the financial stability of the country or any part of the country is threatened. So, it is an emergency which is to be declared during financial crisis of a country of India. And however, as provided for in the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978, such a proclamation needs to be approved by both Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha within 2 months from the date of its proclamation. So, 44th Constitutional Amendment says that the approval from both the houses of the parliament is required in financial emergency. So, let's move forward to the last part of this session, that is federalism, in which we will be talking about center state relations. So, federalism. At the time of independence, the diversity of the country was such that the constitution makers thought it fit to have a strong union government within a federal framework. So, it was the time when India was facing such a violent riot between Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims because of the partition. And it was the time when many princely states wanted to get rid of any kind of territorial boundaries or territorial pressure, and they wanted to be an independent states. So at that point of time, it was believed that uh, India should be a strong union government to ensure that no area should go away. So, provisions related to center state relations are enumerated in Part 11 of the Constitution. The Indian Constitution provides for the governments with specified powers in various states too. India's constitution thus has both centralizing and decentralizing feature. So, India is a union government. India has a strong union government, but states are also given some kinds of powers. So, it has both centralizing and decentralizing features. Let's talk about center state relations. So, the problems in center state relations came into fore after non Congress government came to power in several states. So, since inception or since India got independence, it was all over